Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to the second talk show of the annual literary festival, Kavirangam, brought to you by Syahi in association with Thoughts and Inks.
So let me tell you a little bit about our sponsors. Thoughts and Ink is a distinguished literary organization based in Bihar, India. They have connected students with philosophy and literature through their continuous efforts to invoke a good sense of reading, writing, and understanding literature. As a result of this corona pandemic, they have chosen social media platforms to bring the best of knowledge and experience for young and experienced writers as well as for their readers. So I really thank Thought Sending for making this event happen. Today, I, Ishan, and Chirag will be your hosts for this really special evening.
It's rightly said, right, what should not be forgotten. Today, we bring you a personality whose writings embody this very thought, who is also known as one of the most fearless writers in India, the author of Father Dearest, Merchants of Death, and The Secret Diary of Kasturba. We heartily welcome Miss Neelima Dalmia Adhar. Welcome, ma'am, and we thank you for giving us this opportunity to be your host and for taking your time off your busy schedule to make this session happen.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here.
Okay, so starting off the show with one of the most basic questions that you might have answered a lot in your previous interviews. So, what was your life before you got into writing, before the fame and recognition through your published work?
So, okay, so let me tell you, before I actually started writing, which is like in 2000, 1999, 2000, I was a settled domestic kind of person, looking after my children, looking after my own interests. For a short while, I was into business. I ran a very successful export company, and I was doing everything that I wanted to do. I was doing at leisure. I never had any kind of discipline, and never had any kind of schedule where I thought that well, actually, let me put it this way. I never ever thought that I would become a writer. And not one, but three books already published, and one book is in the pipeline, which you shall probably, inshallah, see by the end of the year. So I was just like any other Delhi social person, family person, a mother, a wife, a daughter, doing whatever I did best at my leisure and my time.
That is so interesting to hear, ma'am. So now let us talk about what was the driving force that led to you taking writing up, and that too about your father. That is like really interesting. So can you please tell us about that?
So my driving force always was my mother, because my mother herself was a prolific writer. She had 47 books published in her lifetime. And she was given the Padma Bhushan the year she died in 2006 for her contribution to Hindi literature. So she was my driving force in the sense that I always lived in an environment of studying, of reading, of writing, of literature, of poetry. And I often used to edit and correct her books and type, not typecast, but like how they do is that from her writing, copy it so that it was made worthy of submission to the editors and things like that. So my the atmosphere at home was always that of intellectual pursuit and of literary pursuit, and she was the one who always pushed me into writing. And she used to even say that you'll get a lot of name and fame if you write your father's biography. So it was her idea which eventually took shape when I began to write. But frankly, I never thought I have the discipline or the perseverance or the focus to be able to write a book. But I guess it was meant to happen. So I would say that I would give that credit completely to my mother for having pushed me into this field of writing.
Ma'am, like, was there any hesitation in your mind while you were writing Father Dearest? Because it is known to have exposed some fiercely guarded truths about your family in the book.
No, the only hesitation was before I started writing. And that hesitation was not because I was hesitant to write about it. That hesitation was because I was just, let me say, I was just too lazy. I just didn't think that I had it in me, that discipline to be able to pursue and write a book, because writing a book takes out a huge chunk of your life. So I just
Yes.
thought that I won't be able to do it. It's not in me. That was the hesitation. But once I started writing, there was no way it could have come in a guarded way. What I wrote was what I thought and what I felt. It was candid, it was brutalizing, it was bold, it was my life. So I never had any second thoughts about the way this book was going to be presented. I always said that either it goes like this or not at all.
Ma'am, what was the response for your book, like from the readers and more importantly from your family and friends?
Well, let me tell you that in the first month, it went into the second reprint. So it was sold out. The critics, it was very well received. It was a book which was a slice of history, which my father, everybody knew, but never knew that side of his life. It was he was as part of Indian history pre-independence, which people had conveniently chosen to forget. So, in a way, I resurrected the spirit of my father, and it was extremely well received. I don't think there was any newspaper mainstream that didn't review it. I don't think there was anybody who didn't read it. I mean, like, it was a response so overwhelming that I was shocked myself. I never thought I would get that kind of response. And as far as this family goes, my own immediate family, my mother was a supporter in writing the book. She was a lot of inspiration, not only because I inherited the ability to write from her, but also facts about my father's life. Because I was 50, when I was born, my father was 56 years old. So there was a whole chunk of his life that was there before I was. So my mother gave me very valuable inputs about his life. And so that part of the family was taken care of. But my extended family, my stepmothers, my step siblings, they were all very appalled by the writing. That it was too brutalizing. They said that she's written only a one side of her story, which is totally incorrect and prejudiced. And to which my answer was that there's 18 of us, one story. Each one is free to write their own story. You can write yours and you can trash mine. Of course, after that, no other books were written and nobody dared to trash it.
Like, I really wanted to ask you about your childhood. Like, you had a really interesting childhood. So, can you tell how was your equation with your father and how did your childhood go?
See, my childhood, if you want to know, we were like products of oddity. Like my father had six wives, and we were 18 siblings, and each one lived in different homes. Each one meaning each wife and the children lived in different homes. So we were a product of polygamy for a start, and we were a product of oddity because I didn't know anybody else who had a father who was divided between four, five wives, and who had other siblings who we were not allowed to meet. And so, in a sense, it was a very weird kind of setup at home. And I didn't even realize how odd my home was until I started going into the homes of my friends and my schoolmates. And then I realized that, we what we consider normal is considered bizarre in other people's homes. But having said that, I must say that my childhood, because there were seven of us, we didn't need friends. We were always one big gang of warriors, if you want to call it that. That we were fighting, we were friends, we didn't need anybody else. We used to sleep in a dormitory. It was like going to a boarding school. So there was a huge long hall in which there were seven beds where we all slept. So it was a fulfilling childhood in terms of my siblings. I grew up in a home full of laughter and full of bullying and full of, what you want in normal childhood. You want a lot of family. So, in that sense, we grew up, it was fun. But the flip side of it was that my mother was a depressive, my father was a father in absentia. He hardly ever visited us. So that was something which was part of the oddity of my childhood. And I didn't even understand how it impacted me till when I wrote my book. Because until then, we just grew up. We just grew up, and I grew up thinking that this is normal. This is how people live. So it's only when I wrote my book that I realized that I had so much angst inside me, which needed, or which found its way out. I found expression in the way I felt, and I came to terms with those demons which were inside me, which I didn't even know were there. But if you ask me to, in one word, to describe my childhood, I would say um, partly growing up with brothers and sisters, it was exciting, but living with a depressive mother was very scarring.
So, ma'am, would you say that you will trade your childhood for a maybe conventional childhood that most of the people go through?
No, no, because conventional and normal is not exciting for me. I'm only attracted to oddities, and I'm only attracted to things which are bizarre. And you might think I'm psychotic when I'm saying that. But the truth is that I would not like to change my childhood for anybody else. Of course, I'm not saying that we could have used a little bit of parenting, which was better if my father had been around. But I think that who I am today, the way I shaped out, the writer in me, the person who I am, the quirks that I have no regrets about that. If I were to change something, I would only change the relationship between my mother and my father. If there was more love between them, it would have filtered down to us. Other than that, I don't want to have a normal childhood with a husband, wife, two very loving parents and one child. Of course, though, I have to admit that there were many times when I was like, I used to wish that all my brothers and sisters would just disappear and I was the only child of my parents and there was nobody else there. But that's, of course, on the lighter side. But frankly, no, I don't know if I would be happy in a conventional, normal kind of home. It doesn't excite me. Oddities excite me and bizarre things excite me.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh,
And we are really fortunate that however it turned out great.
That
So, ma'am,
no, if it turned out great. You are watching me from a distance. You're watching Neelima Adhar, the writer, the poet, this person who comes on TV and says all the funky, nice, quirky things which make you laugh and which make you say that, oh wow, how much fun. But I don't know how it turned out. I don't know how, if I were to be judged by let's say normal standards, how I would be judged. Maybe psychotic, maybe bipolar, maybe schizophrenic. I don't know what it is, but I'm happy the way I turned out. Yeah.
so,
yes.
ma'am, like, what would you suggest those people, those who think that they had a scarred childhood?
That is it's a very common occurrence because there are there are fewer homes with normal kind of environment, and there are more homes with disturbed childhoods. So dysfunctional homes do create scars. And as a parent, I can say that if I am a parent which is creating a dysfunctional home, I owe it to my children to be able to create a settled environment. Because, now the demands of society and children in homes, which I see now, my children and my grandchildren, it's much more taxing. Bringing up children is not what it used to be when we were growing up. And the repercussions of a broken home or a dysfunctional family are far more serious than what they were in our times. Either we were able to absorb it, we didn't know better, or we were stronger people living in big joint families. It created a stronger personality. We could take greater knocks, or the times were different. But today, as a child struggling in a dysfunctional home, it's a big challenge. I don't know. I know a lot and lot and lot, alarmingly number of children in their teens who have to go for counseling. They have anxiety issues, they have depression, they have suicidal thoughts, they turn to drugs, they turn to even self harm. So those are very, very disturbing, uh, rampant occurrences that are happening across the globe. It's not just India. And what's alarming is that I have teenage grandchildren who go to all the best public schools of Delhi, and I'm absolutely appalled by the number of disturbed children that are there. It makes my heart bleed that I don't know. It's something I don't know how to correct. It's something which is a deep rooted malady in our society today. It's the duty of every parent to take charge and to try and create an environment whereby disturbed children can be sort of grounded back again. It's not easy. And I don't know if I would like to be in that position today. But as a parent, we owe it to our children, and the children are we are bringing up a very disturbed lot of children today, which is very sad. It's a very, very telling and a sad comment on today's society.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, and I'm sure the people who are going through this will surely be helped by this talk, and they'll see how even you came out of all the things
I,
that might
I
have gone in your life.
I certainly hope so.
Yes,
Ishan and Chirag, you people are the youth, the voice of the youth today. You are going to be bringing in another generation. When we'll be dead and gone, it is your awareness which will trickle down into the next generation. And I do hope that even if I can make a minuscule, a small atomic kind of difference to the wellness, emotional wellness of a generation, I will feel that my mission on earth, if I want to call it that, has been realized. And I hope that people who are listening to my talk can benefit from that and say that, okay, if, we can all do it. We can all do it.
yes. Yes, ma'am. That is really inspiring. And now coming back to your books, your second book, Merchants of Death. How did you choose arms trade as a subject for the book? Because that is really something which we don't hear about, which is not like the part of mainstream media. How did you choose arms trade as a subject?
Okay, so there's a long history behind that. I've always been fascinated with this kind of arms trade. And arms trade is not today what it was in the days that I wrote the book. There were 4 or 5 families who controlled the selling of arms and the selling of defense equipment into India. And I happened to have an inside view because my husband was working at that time as press and publicity secretary of the Samajwadi Party, and Mulayam Singh Yadav was the defense minister at that time. So I had a little bit of an advantageous insight into the workings of the arms trade. So it always fascinated me. I was always sitting at the edge and watching. I was always reading about it, about all the billion, multi-billion dollar deals that happened at that time, starting from Bofors right up till Sukhoi, and then now we come to the Rafale. It's always been of interest to me, and I wanted to create an environment of people who are in that bracket of wealth and the kind of corruption that it starts, the rot sets in right at the lowest rung and it goes up to the highest person in governance. That was my attempt to create a story. And of course, the other thing, arms trade was the backdrop of the story. But the main line of the story was the Marwari society. I wanted to depict a whole generation of Marwari society, the maladies of the society that I belong to, which few people know, a lot of people, which few people know, a lot of people don't know, and the ones who do know try to push it under the carpet. So arms trade was something that fascinated me. And because I felt that I had an advantage by knowing what is happening, the inside working of how these these deals were done, what kind of monies were exchanged, how what kind of how corruption seeps into what level, and how laws are there is a nexus between the politicians and the arms suppliers and the manufacturers. It's a whole big chain which stays below the surface. And then the amount of wealth which is involved in all this uh, uh, from the time a need is created, that we need to buy, let's say it's needing to buy submarines, that okay, the Indian defense system, the navy needs submarines. From the time the need is created, that they say, that they decide that okay, this is the intention, this is the budget, and this is what we're going to spend, and this is how we're going to acquire the submarines. So from the time that the tenders are floated till the time that the orders are actually given to the people who are bidding for those tenders, that whole process can sometimes take several governments. It's not done like overnight, that okay, you give me a tender and you have to make a bridge, and the lowest bidder will get the tender, will be awarded the tender to do it. It doesn't work like that. So it takes in the governments, the defense ministers. I mean, like, it's a crazy nexus. You can go nuts trying to figure the whole thing out. And what I've done in my book just barely touches the surface. I can write at least, 5 more books and not cover it all on how these things work. And maybe even I don't know the nuances of it.
So are the characters in your book based on imagination, or are they based on people from real life that you have actually met?
No fiction is fiction,
Yeah.
and no real is real. Everything is interconnected. The stories are part of the Marwari Society stories are part of my extended family. Some of the characters I have camouflaged, they're people I know. Some of the characters in the political backdrop, everybody knows, it's very easy to identify them. So some characters are fictitious. A lot of characters are political, what should I call it? Entities who are very easily identifiable, and some characters are part of my extended family.
So how was your experience of writing a fictional book? Because you write a biography before, and how was the transformation of going from a biography to writing a fictional book? How was
See,
that?
the challenge for me, first of all, it wasn't pure fiction. It
Yeah.
was based on, so when I was researching for my father's biography, I had a lot of leftover material from my father's life, which I felt deserved to go into a book. I didn't want it to be unread. So it was partly fiction and it was partly created from real life characters. Although I have to admit that I find it much easier to write non-fiction than to write fiction, because fiction, you have to distill from your imagination, whereas non-fiction is something that you are just filtering through your mind, and you're creating a story which already happened. It's colored by your perception, it's colored by your thoughts, it's colored by how you have interpreted things. But I find it easier to write non-fiction than to write pure fiction.
You are a student of psychology. You have done your master's in psychology from Delhi University, and you've also taught there. So, how much of your knowledge of psychology was helpful in writing a fictional book?
Let me put it this way, that had I not been a student of psychology and had I not studied people, and I call it like people watching, had I not been that, I don't think I would have been able to create the depth in my characters the way have been able to in the books. Because it is my knowledge of psychology that helped me to unravel, like get into the soul of the character that I was writing about. I was able to view a character not just at a linear level. It's like viewing a character from every dimension. You get into the soul of that character. You start thinking the way that character would think. For instance, in Kasturba's diary, Like I was able to, I think, quite successfully infiltrate into the mind of Kasturba. And I feel that had I not had that background of psychology, it would have been a much greater challenge for me to do it. Maybe that sensitivity wouldn't have been there had I not been able to do it, had I not done psychology.
So, ma'am, as you mentioned, like the Secret Diary of Kasturba. So now coming to this book, so you have told in many interviews that I think it was Kasturba who chose me to tell her untold story. So could you please tell us more about this?
That's a it's a very interesting thing you've touched upon, Chirag, because I'm I myself am astounded that when I'm writing about a character, I lose myself in that character. I feel that that character, I'm possessed by that character. By possession, I mean कि जैसे उसके अंदर उसकी आत्मा आ गई है. So with Kasturba, I did not want to write this book on Kasturba because after writing Father Dearest, after writing my father's colorful life and that flamboyant personality that he was, and then after writing Merchants of Death, which is such a it's such a pulsating like slice of society. I thought that Kasturba's life will be so insipid. Who will read it? It's not me. I like to write books which are, of the anti-hero, of the person who is I don't like high geographies. I like to write books like if you were to tell me write a book on Vivekanand and write a book on Ravan, I would like to write Ravan's character. You're getting the gist of what I'm saying. Or Hitler, for instance, if you were to say that, do a book on Hitler, I would say that, okay, what is it that made Hitler so evil? So I felt when I started reading about Kasturba, because I was looking for a woman character, that headiness that you feel after you've written a book and it becomes a success, and it's so well read and so well received, and you get critical acclaim. You don't want to come off that high horse. You want to keep that headiness in your life. So I was looking for a woman character, and I wanted to do a character which was around the freedom movement. So there were a few characters which came around, like Kamala Nehru, like Kasturba Gandhi, and Kasturba Gandhi is reluctant to do, but I started reading it. And when I started reading stuff on Kasturba, I realized how much misinformation there was about her. And it was almost like I was gripped by that voice, that I was gripped, that it was almost as if that soul is saying that you need to tell my story. Kasturba was not the one that you saw in Richard Attenborough's film Gandhi. Kasturba was not the one who nobody ever talked about. And Gandhiji in his diary mentioned her as this blink and you missed, like she was there and she wasn't there. No, she wasn't. There was so much I learned about Kasturba just reading, and there was very little information about her. That's when I felt that Kasturba has chosen me to write this book. I have to become Kasturba's voice and tell her story to the world. There was another side of Gandhi that nobody knew about, where all people knew and they wanted to push it under the carpet. Kasturba was the wife. I wanted to write about Gandhi, Mohandas the man, not about Mahatma Gandhi, the freedom fighter. So that's how I feel that I was chosen by Kasturba to write this book. Why didn't anybody else write this so many years? Kasturba died in 1944. There was a whole, like, 5 generations after that who could have written on her. Why didn't anybody else write it? So that's why I feel that I was chosen to write that book. The same way I feel that my book, which is now I'm going to submit the manuscript now, which is in publishing. It's on Radha. Okay, Radha, and I know that I have channeled an energy from some other zone, from some other planet, to be able to write about Radha. Who am I to write about Radha? I'm just one small human mortal with a small limited thinking. So that's why I say that even Radha has chosen me to write a book.
It is really interesting that you mention Radha, and I have heard in your other interviews, you also told a story which was really interesting about how you got into how you believed that the paranormal exists or some connection exists between you and Radha. Can you please tell the audience about that as well?
I will tell you it's a bit premature, but Ishan, because you have asked me, and I'm on a platform where or there are all this voice, this generation, who I always feel I address my books to and my voice to, because I feel if I'm not able to tap into your energies of the youth, if I'm not able to attract with my writings, if I'm not able to grip you, then my writing is useless. So, because you have asked me this question, I'll tell you, I have a tremendous belief in the paranormal. I fear the paranormal. I don't want to dabble in it, but I know that it's around me, and I have a certain sensitivity, which even astrologers at my birth chart said that she will have surreal experiences with the paranormal as she grows older. So I'm not going to other experiences which I've had, which we'll keep for another platform, another day. But let's come to Radha. So Radha came to me in a dream. I was in Ranchi. I had gone for one of my book promos of Kasturba Gandhi, and there was a clairvoyant. I didn't know him at all. He was sitting in the audience listening to me. And after the book was finished, and he said one or two things about me, just completely out of the blue, that you have a mission on this planet, and you were a woman in your last birth, and somehow these things are very fascinating when you hear about things about yourself which have no rationale, which nobody knows, and you don't know whether to believe it or disbelieve it. And then I said that, it came to me. I said, I want to write. He said, what are you going to write? I said, I don't know. It's going to be something surreal. It has to be paranormal. It has to be around death. It has to have, the child in the womb. This is the main threads of all my books have these elements in it. I said, I want to write on Radha. And he said that you meditate on Radha. I said, but I don't know where to get the material because I don't want to write about Radha, the goddess. I want to write about Radha, the woman. Who was Radha? She wasn't born a goddess. And there's so much debate around who Radha was and whether she was actually there or not there. She's just a poet's imagination, what it was. So I said, I want to do this. And he said the most startling thing to me. And he said, नवरात्रि आने वाली है आप नवरात्र में राधा पे मेडिटेट करना. So I'm terrible at meditation. I'm too flighty in my head. I cannot concentrate or sit in one place. And you tell me to meditate in 2 minutes, I'll be thinking about, oh, I have to go there. I have to go and have coffee at Starbucks. I have to get out of here. I have to do this. I have to do that. So I'm very, very, I cannot concentrate. I got a dream of Radha. I actually dreamt of Radha. And I actually dreamt of Radha telling me her story. And this sounds very, very sensational when I say it. And I'm not saying it just to attract, this feeling that, okay, I'm trying to score, to grab your eyeballs or your ears to say that you will read my book. I have actually written a story about Radha, which has occurred to me every time I wrote a chapter. The next chapter just came to me in my mind. You want to call it fiction? Nobody, that story is not written anywhere. Of course, I did research because Krishna had to come into the story. I did read the Bhagavad Puran. I did read uh, Krishna's life. I did read all of that. I brought Krishna into it. But Radha's story, Radha's husband, who was she married to? Radha was actually Krishna's mommy. She was 13 years older than him. So all that just came to me in that it was corroborated by some of the research which I did in the books I read. But this story which I have written has actually been narrated to me by Radha. And nobody can question me on that. I have written, my book starts with I I dreamt that I was Radha who was dreaming that she was me. That was the beginning of my book. How do you challenge that? So what do you say? I say Radha chose me to write her story. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's up to you. I'm not calling it fiction. I'm not calling it biography. I'm not calling it anything. You give it whatever name you want to. But how will you challenge me when I say that I have channeled Radha's spirit and energy? It's her voice in the story. Who was Radha? Discover it in the book.
Ma'am, so there's a question from the audience.
Yes.
So, like, they want to ask, like, how would you relate science and God together? Science and paranormal.
You cannot relate the two. You certainly cannot. All the rationalists will trash all the things that we say about the paranormal, or we say that there is a other planes that exist which we don't know about. Okay, I don't argue with the rationalists. I can very humbly say that I believe. I'm just reading that question. It would be surprising to know how does she relate to science and God together. Yes. Okay, my answer to that is I believe in God, but I'm not religious. I believe there's a higher power. I believe in reincarnation. I believe in life after death. I believe that birth is not the beginning and death is not the end. I have done science. I believe science is a field which doesn't know everything. Each day there are new things which are thrown up which science cannot explain. I don't have the knowledge to trash the scientists by saying that, this theory is wrong and this theory is right. I don't have that knowledge. But my soul, which I believe in, which my soul is not just come out of nowhere. And I will just say one thing to all the scientists. That's the only explanation I can give in my knowledge of quantum physics, that energy is neither created nor destroyed. When I was born, I didn't come from nowhere. That energy came from somewhere. And when I die, that energy is not going to go away. It'll go into the ashes, it'll go into the Ganga, it'll go into the plants. One new seed will be born, a bird will eat that seed. There's a whole cycle of life. So if energy is neither created nor destroyed, then how can you say that there is no life after death? How can you say that there was no life before you were born? So, my very humble answer to all the rationalists is that I don't know enough to tell you that you are wrong, but I know enough to believe what I believe is right.
Yes, ma'am. And I also heard that you do a lot of research. You did a good amount of research for Kasturba, and as I'm sure you did for Radha. And can you please tell us about went into the research for Kasturba's character that you wrote, and how much of the fiction was actually facts? Uh, how much did you, how much creative liberty did you take while writing the book?
So, yes, there is creative liberty in the book. There's a writer's license because I have created the voice of Kasturba, which is what. Let me give you an example. First of all, let me tell you about the research. So there's very little material written about Kasturba. Okay, there are just one or two books. There's one biography written by Arun and Sunanda Gandhi, which is Kasturba's great grandson or grandson, sorry, which I used to get my facts from. Then I got a lot of facts from Gandhiji's My Experiments with Truth about Kasturba's life. Then I collated a lot of facts from the letters that Kasturba Gandhi wrote to her children or Gandhiji wrote to her, and I got a lot of facts from there. But the non-fiction, that is all the fictional part. So I was very, very careful of not writing anything which violates the tenets of the historically documented facts. Okay, I'm dealing with Gandhiji. He's the father of the nation. Every single breath that Gandhiji took from the day he was born till after he died has been documented or recorded, or autobiographies have been written, biographies have been written. He himself has written it. Every single part of his life has been documented. But nobody thought that in every frame of Gandhiji's life, Kasturba was there, whether it was the Salt March, whether it was his fast unto death, whether it was him in South Africa, whether he was in prison. There was one invisible person in every frame of that life. So all I did was that I said, instead of writing this story from Gandhiji's perspective, I just turned the camera around and I wrote it from her perspective. Like, for instance, And I always quote this as an example, which is where I got my inspiration from, is when Gandhiji declared that he's going to turn celibate. Their four children were born. They were in South Africa. So he just one fine day comes and says that, okay, from now you and I are brother and sister. We're no longer husband and wife. A big song and dance and drama has been made about, okay, Gandhiji was declared celibate, and he took the freedom movement after that forward. Who has documented how Kasturba reacted? Nobody. So all I did was that those major incidents in Gandhiji's life, which have formed milestones in his shaping how his life panned out, all I did was that I created a voice of Kasturba where she tells him that how can you take this decision without asking me? Now, it's not recorded anywhere. So my argument on that is because we're talking about history, I cannot distort the facts. So I'm saying that you can challenge me if I have distorted any facts, but you cannot challenge me on my interpretation of that fact. So interpretations were where, if you want to call it, is the fictional element. Because I don't know if it happened. But I just said that if I was Kasturba and it was happening to me, this is how I would have reacted. If I saw my husband not treating my sons like he was treating everybody else in the ashram, if I thought that this was, um, um, how do you call it? It was being favoritism in reverse, that everybody is my son except my own children. Nobody says how she reacted. So all I did was that I became that voice and said, how can you do it? Sometimes I feel, which I've written in the book, in one of her soliloquies, that I feel that maybe these boys would have been better off if they were not your sons. They would have got more kindness and more love from you. So that's all I did. So that, if you want to call it, is the fictional part of the book. Otherwise, the story is strictly adheres to whatever is historically documented in Gandhiji's life. Even his own sexual experiments after Kasturba died, or while she was there, where he was testing his celibacy and he was sleeping naked in bed with his own grandniece and his niece, even that, it's all documented there. I have just made Kasturba like she died. Most of it happened. The really sort of sordid experiments happened after she died. But I've kept her alive as a ghost. She's watching it helplessly, and she's saying, "Okay, it's time for you to now just leave. In free India has no role for you."
So, ma'am, like you said, there were a lot of experiences. Would you say that you found your mother's life and Kasturba's life somewhat similar? Like,
Very similar. Very similar. If I were to draw parallels, there's chillingly similar parallels between my father and Gandhiji, between my mother and Kasturba. The difference was that Kasturba was illiterate, my mother was highly prolific and literate. And between myself, my siblings, and Harilal Gandhiji's treatment to his sons, the way my father treated us, there's huge parallels. And then the main parallel was, see, culturally, Gujaratis, Marwadis are the same. So the same ethnic society, the same kind of religious festivals, the same kind of food, the same kind of dressing. So all that was in common. And then you sometimes, it was a very strange remark my son made. My son, who was at that time, he was like 26 when I was writing the book. And like I say, that, I write for you. I write for you, your years, not for people who are my age. I write for your age because I feel that you are the ones who are going to keep that story alive. When he read Kasturba, and I used to read out passages of my book to my children, he said, Mom, you could have named this book Mother Dearest. There's so much similarity between your mother and Kasturba Gandhi. So I found huge similarities there. I won't go into details about things, each and every small incident which had parallels in my life. But yes, Gandhiji, the tyranny that he uh, unleashed upon his children, his treatment with his wife, his seriously dominating society temperament. Yes, Yes, I did see my mother in Kasturba.
Ma'am, so now let's go on a lighter note. Uh, so, ma'am, just a random question. With all the vast knowledge you have collected on books, so we are curious to know as to what would be your top three recommendations for a generation.
Say that again, I missed that. What did you say? What would
Uh,
be
the top three recommendation,
top
the top
three
Ma-
book
book,
recommendations for
yes,
your
yes, book
generation?
recommendation.
which
Yes.
you
मुझसे
think
पूछोगे तो
people
मैं
have
तो
to read.
अपनी तीनों किताबें बोलूंगी. कस्तूरबा पढ़ो, राधा पढ़ो और फादर डियरेस्ट पढ़ो. But no, on a more serious note, there are some brilliant young writers. I can't name top three to you. Anuradha Roy is brilliant. Uh, Chitra Divakurni's books are brilliant. Amish Tripathi, I'm not too crazy about mythological figures. Radha is the exception because there's a different dimension to Radha, but they write beautifully. Who else are the bestsellers? I'm not a fan of Chetan Bhagat. I won't tell you to write. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't be trashing anybody, but that's a different genre of writing. So I would say that any book that see, what books appeal to me are books which go deeply into psychological unraveling of people. They're people centric books. But there are any number of young writers, new writers, who have completely sort of changed the paradigm for the readers of today. And you should read any book that inspires you. Everybody has a story inside them. You read a book and your story comes bubbling out.
So I'm like, what are the important features that you see in a book that are important to you, and how you think a book is good and a book is bad? What are the important features while
I
reading
tell
that
you,
you think
for
are
me
important?
personally, I like people-centric books. So there has to be a central, a personality. It has to be around a person. Or I like books which are social sagas, which go over three, four generations. That. So I like books which have a psychological kind of twist. I love crime stories. And now I'm going beyond books. I'm going on to OT2 streaming platforms where I just love like courtroom drama and crime stories and racy kind of stuff. But on for books, I feel it shouldn't be. It should be an easy read. It shouldn't be too heavy. It shouldn't like weigh on you. You should want to finish the book as quickly as you can. And when the book is finished, it should leave you sad that oh my God, abhi ye kitab khatam ho gayi. I read a fabulous book by called The Gentleman from Moscow. I've mispronounced the name. Something Fouls. Have a chair. Uh, it's it's one of the finest books I've read. Then I read Kiran Nagarkar, who writes beautifully. I read, so it depends on what your interest is. I like books which are people centric, which show you, which show you aspects of a person that you don't normally see. So the writer, like me, gets into the mind or the soul of that person. I like stories which have drama. I like stories which I don't like. I don't like very sweet, how should I cook candy floss kind of books. I don't like those. So I think, and you as young boys, young, happening, you are like really the crux of today's world. You have to get into stories which grip you by the throat and don't let you go till you've put it down. And I'm glad that, children like you are still are engaged in literary activities like this, and you're doing programs like this to tap into the energies of people who have already written books. So clearly, you books are of interest to you, and they are your passion. So pick up any book. If it doesn't grab you by the first 10 pages, throw it. Just experiment. Use your mind. Just pick up books. I haven't read it, but I'm told Barack Obama's biography is absolutely scintillating. I like biographies, by the way.
So, ma'am, like I feel like I didn't do justice to your book, which is upcoming with about Radha. So, can you please tell more about that book and what is
एक
it about?
एक ईशान एक प्रोग्राम राधा पे करेंगे ना बेटा, अभी से सब बता दूंगी तो फिर उस पे मुझे नहीं बुलाओगे. No, but I'll tell you. Okay, I don't mind sharing this with you. It's not like a spoiler. The book starts. I have begun the book on Radha on trial. Like Krishna has left Vrindavan and gone to Dwarka. He's finished Mathura, he's left Vrindavan, he's gone to Dwarka. And Radha's husband has complained to the village panchayat of adultery and of disnaming the Yadav race and of bringing shame upon their family. And she is summoned for a trial. So the book starts with Radha's trial on the complaint of her husband. And she's banished from Vrindavan. And then she goes to Dwarka to meet Krishna. So it's all in flashback because when she's going back there, her whole life, then from the time she was born, how she comes into Vrindavan, how she becomes first the caretaker of Krishna, then she becomes his lover, and then he leaves her and goes away. So it's really her life in flashback, and then she goes back to Dwarka, which she was not supposed to. She was never ever allowed to enter into Dwarka, and she dies in his arms. That's in a nutshell the story of Radha, which is what she told me.
So, ma'am, let's not take this session too long. So, the last question. So, like a lot of people are watching this live stream at the moment. So, if you could inspire them with a few words that would motivate them on their journey as writers.
Okay, so boys and girls, all of you, this is my favorite generation. You are my voice. If I were given a choice, I would never like to grow out of the age that you are today. And my favorite birthday wish is be today yours forever. So if I could have my way, I would freeze myself in your time. And I want to tell you, my words for you people is that never forget that you people are the fountainhead of energy. You are going to take this world forward. Never underestimate your qualities. What you conceive, you can achieve. Everyone has a story. If it's about literature, you can write your own story. Everyone has a life which you can make the way you want it to be. You have the power to shape your destiny. So just go for it and don't let anything hold you back. There's absolutely wonderful things waiting for you. All you need to do is open your eyes and receive.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really inspiring. And thank you so much for this amazing session and like giving us time from your busy life. We really
No,
hope we can talk to you again. And it
man,
was
sure
really
we will,
wonderful.
Chirag and Ishan, because like I said, that there's nothing I enjoy more than sharing my thoughts and my madness with your generation. So keep it going, keep the flag flying, keep thoughts and ink, and your institute, your organization, keep it going, and much more power to you, and hopefully many more sessions with me.
Definitely,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Ishan. Thank you, Chirag. I loved being with you.